Hi, everyone. May peace be on you all, and welcome to 2025's very first episode of I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. And I know some of y'all must be thinking, but Shella, aren't you on hiatus? And I am technically on hiatus because this year, as I've decided, my episodes will not be on schedule, meaning like it's not going to be every 2 weeks. It's probably going to be whenever I can record when I have an important guest with me that I would like to feature. And again, this is not like a farewell sort of thing. It's just like I think I need to sort out my life sort of situation. But I'm still here. I still do love podcasting. That's why I'm back with this year's very first, The Whole Muslim. And I am featuring on this episode the Adia Collective. And with me, I have my guest AZ and her name. And as for the people who can see me on YouTube, and her picture identity has been kept hidden for, I guess, privacy, but most of all, considering the things that the Dia Collective really deals in, it's more of like a safety issue because lots of crazy people out there. Okay, we're not even going to get into this, but please welcome AZ. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Alhamdulillah. How are you?
We're good. And please tell us a little bit about, because you are the founder of the Dia Collective. And how did all of this come out? What does the Dia Collective do? Please tell us. I didn't even give a proper intro, but I want to know from you that what does the Dia Collective do, and how did this all come about?
Yeah, of course. So the Adia Collective exists to support Muslims and their communities with their pregnancy ending journeys.
Mm,
And by that, we typically mean things like abortion, miscarriage, and stillbirth.
mm,
And we sometimes separate these things into different categories. But as a lot of folks who have navigated abortion care or pregnancy ending care will know, sometimes it's not so easy to kind of categorize what you're going through. So we'll often use the kind of terminology of pregnancy endings. And our current kind of offering of support is free doula care. For those of you who don't know what a doula is, they're kind of like stand-in friends, if you will, people who support and honour and protect your pregnancy ending journeys, whether that is through abortion care or miscarriage care, or of course, people might be more familiar with doulas in the capacity of supporting with birth as well. So we operate across various nation states, across the UK, the US, providing supports to Muslims all across the world, really, through our free doula support, through our online peer spaces that are open to Muslims who've had or are currently in the process of navigating abortion and soon to be miscarriage, and also through our political education work as well, because we know that reproductive rights are not a single struggle issue, and that particularly as Muslims, there's many things that we're having to navigate, particularly those of us living in the imperial core, let's say, such as hostile policies and environments about migration, increased policing, the criminal justice system or lack of justice system, and of course our healthcare as well. So we do that. There's currently four of us who steward the collective, all of us kind of holding different capacities. And we've been around for almost 3 years.
mm-hmm,
I guess I should say that whilst we are like a Muslim reproductive justice or a Muslim pregnancy ending collective, we're definitely not the first ones to kind of do or start this work. As Black and Brown Muslims, we know and we honour the fact that doulaing or stewarding pregnancy endings for many of us is like an ancestral
mm-hmm,
practice. And actually, a really big part of Islamic history is recognizing how precious and important those kind of transitional periods are. But I guess in terms of why we were actually founded, so I founded the collective in 2022 after navigating various spaces, particularly around kind of gender-based violence, women's rights, if you want to use that term, pro-choice spaces, and just really not feeling safe or comfortable at any of these events, not feeling represented, and feeling like a seat at the table within the kind of pro-choice space wasn't really what I needed or what many people in my community needed. And in fact, what we actually needed was a space kind of outside of that heavily like Western and white gaze to navigate our pregnancy endings in community. And our kind of hopes and our values and our dreams for the collective is basically just that Muslims who navigate pregnancy endings can do so with all of the supports, be that cultural, spiritual, and practical, that they need, and that folks navigating pregnancy endings, feel supported by their community, and like they have what they need to connect with Allah when they're doing this as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. But again, as you had mentioned, this is one of those things that, especially living in the US, we now have like the whole the aspect of it has been shrunk down to nothing. Just the mention of miscarriage care or abortion care is enough to land you in a lot of hot water. There's people, who are giving this information, but it can't be spoken of directly for fear of literal, I guess, repercussion for it. Um, so in that aspect, because what we understand according to the laws that are being created in the US, it's all according to Christian law. If you could really put into perspective, I think a lot of people don't understand that Muslim law for these things is quite a bit different than Christian law.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's really important for us to kind of challenge these assumptions that come up that basically view not just Christians, but specifically like white Christo-fascism as the default for religious people. And I think that many of us, will feel similar in viewing Islam as a faith that is centered around free will, around bodily autonomy, and around divine justice as well. And I think it's really interesting, when I talk to a lot of people about abortion within Muslim communities, and I say communities here because obviously, whilst we are one ummah, like there are many different traditions and practices and cultures and parts of the world that we're from too, that also kind of shape our experience of how we practice. And I think there's a couple things to kind of unpack here. The first is that abortion as itself is not something that's mentioned in the Quran. And so the concept of like an abortion ban or an abortion restriction is not something that finds itself kind of in Islamic practice and Islamic history. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of clarify because, again, I do think the vast majority of Muslims get kind of lumped into this perception of religious people that often centers folks who have completely different, often very harmful agendas compared to us. I think, like across the Muslim tradition and across different, let's say, sects or different schools of thought, abortion is maybe understood differently. So you might have some people who refer to something called ensoulment, which is when in Islam we believe life kind of begins for a pregnancy. So in Christianity or many practices of Christianity, traditionally people, particularly those who are anti-abortion, will talk about life beginning at conception. And generally, that's not something that's kind of grounded in Islam. It's not necessarily something that Muslims believe. This idea of like life beginning at conception again is something that finds itself in, let's say, more Christian thought, and specifically more is something that's used by a lot of anti-abortion or anti-choice activists, let's say, that again isn't necessarily something that finds itself grounded in Islam or Islamic roots. Many Muslims, for example, might be familiar with the concept of ensoulment, which is where, I guess, for ease or to use simpler terms, is kind of when we believe that the soul kind of enters the pregnancy, when life begins, or when the kind of developing fetus starts to kind of resemble maybe a baby, or just something that we associate with life. And for most Muslims, that is definitely not something that happens at conception.
Mm.
Um, People will say, some will say it begins at like 100 days or 120 days, sometimes 140 days. And for some people, that is like quite a hard cutoff and kind of when they view abortion to be acceptable or not. But again, this is not a universal rule. I think there's some other things that we can really draw upon when we're understanding abortion in the Islamic context too, which is, that everything kind of that happens to us is meant to kind of be that way, that everything is
Mm.
Allah's will. And many abortion seekers who are Muslims will describe abortion as a type of rahmah, as a type of mercy, as
Mm.
something that they needed to help them in a situation where they were experiencing discomfort. Things
Right.
like relief from discomforts, things like taking care of your health, again, are really, really important aspects of our Islamic faith as well. And I also think that when we think about health in the Islamic context and pregnancy, it is always the health and the well-being and the life of the person who's carrying the pregnancy that comes first. And I think that helps us to kind of understand why abortion is such an intrinsic part of Islamic history, both pre and post colonial times as well. And why, in many Muslim communities, abortion is something that is encouraged, something that is seen as okay and acceptable, and why Muslim people throughout the entire history of Islam have been having abortions as well. And I think that when you look at abortion movements, let's say in the global north, there's a huge tendency to kind of associate that with the second wave of feminism, right? With the rise of, let's say, sex education and contraception and sexual health, and white women pushing this movement. But actually, one thing that I'm always really keen to mention is that the history of abortion and self-managed abortion in the global north actually comes from enslaved African people, many of whom were Muslim, the first Muslims to exist in what is now known as the United States. Many of them were Muslim, and they brought their practices with them of doulaing, of managing their abortions, of relying on herbs and ancestral practices to help people to pass pregnancies in ways that were safe. And these people were so good at the work that they did that they actually ended up supporting not just enslaved people, but Western settler colonizers as well. They had entire systems of healthcare that Western settler colonizers were using too. And the history of abortion links very closely to the quote unquote end of chattel slavery as well, when people were realizing that actually, the formal existence of slavery is no longer allowed, and we're going to move into kind of using other means to kind of oppress people and dictate who can and can't kind of give birth, and whose health and whose lives are worth kind of healthcare.
Right, right. And before I get move into like the details of that, if you could explain a little bit in detail of what does the Adia Collective do, in a sense that if somebody comes to you, how do you help them?
Yeah, so I think that is a very helpful question. I guess it kind of depends what they come to us for, right? Like there are folks who come to us and they say, "Hey, I need an abortion and I need someone to support me or help me through this." And if that's something that our team can do, then we'll gladly do that. We'll provide virtual support or in-person support depending on where this individual is. And that can be everything from, I don't know what to do, I don't know what decision to make, I need someone to talk to who's not going to judge me. It can be people who've made their decision and need some support planning and preparing for that. It can be help with accompanying and transport and kind of meeting the physical needs of an individual. Or, as many of the people who do request our doula support ask for, it can be thinking of ways to incorporate faith and religion into how someone passes their pregnancy as well. So that's a really crucial part of the work that we do. And definitely, I would say in the last 3 years that we've been running, A lot of the work that we have been doing has also been supporting people to understand abortion law and abortion restrictions. And obviously, this was heightened by Roe v. Wade being overturned. But even, for example, here in the UK, where myself and another one of our doulas operate, we have found that with kind of increased policing powers, more people are experiencing even greater barriers to abortion. More people's abortions are being investigated. So actually, a lot of what we support people to do is to understand their rights and how to navigate healthcare systems that are intrinsically very violent towards them. We also
Mm-hmm.
we also run like peer support spaces online, drawing on, I guess, what is a very Islamic, but also, you know, it's part of global South tradition for many of us in the diaspora and, you know, in the global South of kind of storytelling and making collective dua. So in these spaces, people who have had abortions or are currently thinking about having an abortion will come, will share as much of their story as they want to, and will connect with other people who've been in similar situations. And I think that of all the things that we do, this is probably my favorite offering, because I think that the people who come are, you know, from all across the world, from all different practices of Islam, having abortions under many different circumstances, for many different, for want of a better word, reasons. And the support that they're
Mm-hmm.
able to give each other, the common ground that they're able to show each other, is so healing for everyone who's involved, including me. And I think that, yeah, those spaces are yeah, really special. And then I guess beyond the kind of personal support that we offer, we do also provide support, not support rather, we do also run political education spaces, recognizing that most of, as I mentioned before, most of the abortion world is white. It's run for cis het white middle class women, and those of us who know that our wombs are one of many sites of struggle don't really get all the information we need from, I guess, workshops or teach-ins about that. Our political education work covers everything from, you know, what is a self-managed abortion and how to support yourself or community members navigating that, to abortion history in Islam, to disability justice and abortion, to carcerality and the criminal justice system and policing and how that links to abortion as well. And then for folks who maybe are already providing abortion care or are abortion providers or doulas who maybe aren't Muslim, we also run trainings to help people to begin their journey, let's say, of dismantling structural Islamophobia. And in these spaces, we talk about
Mm-hmm.
how anti-Blackness and Islamophobia and colonialism are one and the same and iterations of each other, and how gynecology has, for the longest time, been a point at which these things intersect with each other as well. So, yeah, we kind of have something for
Right.
everyone.
And I'm so glad for that. It is so needed. Um, and that's the thing, especially in this kind of climate atmosphere. The work you do is becoming harder and harder. So, how do you manage to do this safely for yourselves as uh, abortion aftercare provider and pre-care providers, as doulas, even for miscarriages? How do you do it safely? You and your team. Because specifically in the US, it has come to the point that I live in Texas, very conservative red state, that can't even get care for miscarriages anymore. Doctors generally cannot intervene. If you have you want an abortion after a case of rape, incest, any of those things, domestic violence, or even if that baby is unviable, it's not possible to get the care. So how are y'all doing this safely for yourselves and the people you help?
Yeah, I mean, I think that not only is that a good question, but it's also an ever evolving practice for us as a team. I think one thing I would like to kind of highlight is that Roe v. Wade being overturned was something that people had been, you know, knew was going to come at some point. And for many people, the overturning of Roe v. Wade was not where abortion became inaccessible. And I think that many of our community, whether that is the actual team or whether it's doulas kind of within our doula directory, have been operating in very, very hostile environments for a very long time. Whether that is supporting people to travel to various parts of the country or out of the country, whether that is supporting people who are unhoused, or supporting people who are undocumented. The list kind of goes on. I think that a lot of these oppressive structures, they find their heart in US imperialism, which we know didn't start with the Trump administration, even if it's become, let's say, a bit more glaringly obvious during his previous administration and the current one. I think that a lot of the stuff that we do to keep ourselves safe are kind of just good general practice things that folks maybe who are involved in organizing or protesting, or let's say like anti-race work, may be familiar with. We try our best to kind of keep quite a low profile and to maintain anonymity, because we do feel that we owe that to the people that we support as well. We, on a very practical sense, we use secure messaging between the team. Our emails are all secure. And when people contact us, particularly if they're reaching out to us using Instagram or on a Meta profile, the first thing that we do is suggest that they kind of move to a more secure platform as well. I think that something we've been reflecting on recently as well is understanding the importance of kind of how we provide information to, so understanding the difference between, let's say, like in a political education space, the difference between saying one seeking abortion, a person seeking abortion, versus you could get pills in this way. And again, I think that's kind of like a practice that we're developing and working on at the moment. I think we're definitely blessed as a team to be made up of people who are long-standing community organisers, and so who have that safety culture ingrained in them across kind of various aspects of life. So not just kind of abortion work, but just generally keeping an eye on things, because we know that we're more likely to kind of be policed and surveilled as well. We also work and are working quite closely at the moment with our friends at Digital Defence Fund, who do provide support for organisations supporting abortion seekers, and I believe also supporting the trans community as well, with tightening up their digital security.
Right, right. And it's very much needed. As you said, it was not all like even before the overturning of Roe v. Wade, over here outside of abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood, there was always people who were being hostile and protesting, all of these things. And now it has become very much overt in terms of laws and people trying to police any and all of these things. So it has definitely become so much harder for all of you. Um, if you had like some suggestion, how can people then support the work that not that all of you do for sure, but for anybody who is seeking an abortion or even miscarriage care, especially here in the US, someone who has been violated in the most horrific way and they are seeking help for this? How can we support as a community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that I would kind of respond to this question. I think the first thing I would say is to just, I guess, to kind of understand your role within your community and your network. I think, many people within a community are really skilled at explaining and teaching and educating. And for folks who maybe feel that that's a skill set of theirs, I think one thing that's really powerful to do is to understand kind of what the legislation is in your state, let's say,
Mm.
or your nation state, and work towards explaining that in ways that are more accessible to folks in your community. Because I think that even even in places where, let's say, abortion isn't as restricted, like for example here in the UK, the information on abortion is still not accessible, right? Like it's not culturally relevant, it doesn't address the fears that exist in the community, it doesn't address things like
Right.
structural racism. And I think that for folks who have a strong grasp, let's say, of the law or the practicalities of navigating structures of oppression, I think that translating that into more accessible ways is a really, really important thing that we can all be doing as well. I'd also say, kind of like trying to destigmatize and decolonize how you view abortion is also an extremely important part, I think, of this work. I think that abortion is extremely stigmatized, and that is
Right.
something that happened because of colonialism, right? Like initially, abortion and
Right.
pregnancy endings, they were parts of life, right? And those
Right.
transitions from being pregnant to not being pregnant were things that were treated with a lot more respect than they kind of are now. And I think that
Right.
for many of us, abortion is something that affects our friends, our family. Abortion exists in our family histories. And I think that there's, a huge role to play in kind of destigmatizing how we view and we talk about abortion too. And understanding maybe the more nuanced ways in which abortion stigma shows up in our lives as well. So, always expecting, for example, an abortion to be traumatic or someone to have gone through something really hard in order to deserve their abortion. I think that a lot of people do that with really good intentions, but they don't realize that for other people who maybe haven't gone through those things and just want an abortion because they don't want to be pregnant, that can make it more difficult to speak to somebody else in their community about abortion. I think as well, um, there's a lot in kind of this work and in advocating for reproductive justice that is just about care and extending the care that people already do in their communities, and for those that
Mm.
they're connected with to kind of expand into abortion care as well. I think that people, again, because of kind of how colonialism warped our perception of pregnancy outcomes and what's a deserving pregnancy outcome and what's just, something to quickly brush under the carpet. People often are quite intimidated by abortion care and support and don't realize that
Right.
actually most of the things that folks require after an abortion are things that we already have in our toolkits, right? Like a nice meal, checking in on somebody,
Mm.
offering to drive someone to a clinic, offering to take care of somebody's children, or to manage some of their caring responsibilities. Supporting someone with a care plan, just kind of things that we already do for one another without necessarily realizing that those things are very easy to transfer onto abortion as well. And I think the final thing I would say is that even though I think a lot of people, firstly, a lot of people wouldn't have abortions because they're not capable of getting pregnant. For example, like cis men, still have a kind of role to play in abortion and abortion care, I would say. And even if abortion is not something that you would choose for yourself, or you can't imagine a circumstance in which you would have an abortion, I think it's really important for us to be connecting the dots between abortion and other struggles. Like, for example,
Right.
recently, both in the UK and in the US and across the kind of global north, we've been, boycotting and divesting from companies who are invested in the 76-year Nakba and genocide of
Mhm.
Palestinians. And it also came out last year that Planned Parenthood invests money into a company called Raytheon, who are also financing the Israeli genocide on Palestinians. And so
Right.
even if you're not someone who would ever go to a Planned Parenthood, I think it's really important for us to be able to draw those connections between these sites of struggles, to understand that, as I mentioned before, the womb is only one site of violence. But it's
Right.
deeply connected to other things. It's deeply connected to the borders and the nation state. It's deeply connected to our tax money going to fund the oppression of other people. It's deeply connected to the imperialism that we see continuing to kind of flourish across the world as well. So I think that being able to zoom out, I guess, of reproductive rights, and connect those dots, and to share that knowledge and that learning with other people, I also think is extremely important.
No, for sure. I think that's one of the things that we miss when we create one sort of boogeyman. It's one of the things that has happened in the US, that abortion, LGBTQIA rights, all of these things are seen only from very close up. We are unfortunately missing the fact of how this is a part of an overall system of oppression, especially for people of color, marginalized communities. All of this is connected in wider structures of oppression. So I'm so grateful that you mentioned that this is not about just one thing.
Mm,
It is about a bigger system that creates oppression. And for the especially for abortion and miscarriages, this is widely a system of oppressing women, and specifically women of color.
mm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that, when we talk about bodily autonomy, we're not just talking about our rights to kind of do what we want with our body. We're talking about our rights to
Right,
exist in communities that are free from harm, to move
right,
wherever we want to in the world without being policed and told where we can and can't go.
right,
Muslims, both in the UK and the US, are overrepresented within the criminal justice system, right? There are lots of Muslims in
mm,
prison. And again, this is
right.
another site of policing, of taking away someone's bodily autonomy. And I think that
Mhm,
when we zoom out and we see, like, oh, okay, as a Muslim, these are all the restrictions that are not just on my body, but on my religious freedoms, on my freedom to exist, to live, to pray where I want, how I want, then I think the conversation about abortion and the decisions that people make about their reproductive health, yeah, they land a lot better and they feel a lot more grounded in kind of the fullness of our identity rather than just one section of it. I think when we look at kind of all the ways in which Muslims are, like, our bodily autonomy, our freedoms are being restricted, we can see that actually there's not just like a moral obligation to kind of connect these dots and to have solidarity between these struggles, but also like a very practical
right.
logistical one too. Um, and I think that, you know, we tend to use the language of reproductive justice, which is something that was coined by Sister Song, although is something that in recent years maybe folks are moving away from because of Sister Song's inability to recognize the genocide happening in Palestine. But when we talk about reproductive justice, we talk about the right to have children, to not have children, and also to raise the children that we do have in communities that are safe. And I think that that helps to kind of give a much more holistic understanding of what we mean when we say our rights to bodily autonomy. Um, because, yeah, for me, I just feel like everything is a reproductive justice issue, whether that is where people are housed, whether that is the immigration status that people have, whether it's their access to healthcare, whether it's their right to dress how they want, to wear hijab, to not wear hijab, whether it is their right to their gender how they want, and how it feels affirming for them. Like, all of these things come under this kind of conception of reproductive justice as well.
The thing is, I think what you have mentioned is so, that's the thing that's so integral, is just that we are seeing this as a symbol of the fact that our oppression is growing even stronger because these systems are literally like squeezing us tighter and tighter. And abortion care and miscarriage aftercare is just one part of it that they're trying to take away. Um, I am so grateful for all that you and your team does at the Dia Collective. Please let my audience know that, where can they reach out to you? How can they find you with whatever questions? And I hope, like to all my audience members, I expect better of you, that you guys reach out to them in support for what they do and how they exist. So that's what I want you to all to do, not to reach out and bash them, because they do important work. They do work that is essential for the well-being of a community and a group of people that has been forever oppressed. So please let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, of course. And I think before I tell you where to find us, maybe I'll just preface by saying that as a team, we, as I mentioned before, we support Muslims from kind of all walks of life, all experiences, and all kinds of perception on abortion as well. I think that a lot of people assume maybe that the folks that we support view and see abortion exactly how we do, or yeah, that we kind of, sorry, what was I saying? Yeah, I was going to say that one, like a very key tenet of how we provide support at the Avia Collective is meeting people where they are. And so I think that includes folks who have questions about abortion, who are not sure if abortion is right for them, who maybe view abortion as haram and something that they feel that they need to repent or ask for forgiveness for. We support people in those kind of stages and walks of life as well. And we try really hard to never tone police, to never prioritize certain Muslims over others, and as I said, to meet people where they are and provide support that is affirming. And I think that that's probably why we've had quite a good reception from the Muslim community so far. Because as I said, like I've supported people who are pro-abortion and have really positive feelings around their abortions. I've supported people who realistically would describe themselves as being anti-abortion, but have still needed to have abortions. Um, and the support that we provide is not to kind of change their mind or make them view the issue in any other way, but just to remind them that they are loved and cared for, and that Allah's mercy is there for all of us as well.
Indeed.
And in terms of where to find us, we are on Instagram and we also use our website a lot. Our website has lots of information about the work that we provide, as well as information on other Muslim doulas and birth workers, and also how to kind of get our workshops and our trainings into your communities and into your workspaces as well. So yeah, please do get in touch, whether that is because you yourself or someone in your community needs support, whether it's because you're looking to learn and expand your understandings about reproductive justice and abortion from an Islamic perspective, or if you are someone who provides either abortion care or kind of any care, and are looking to kind of better support those navigating pregnancy endings who are also religious people as well.
And everybody can see the addresses on the screen, and they will also be in my show notes, so it'll be easier for everyone to access. Again, AZ, I am so forever grateful that you guys do what you do. It is so needed. Not just because of, I think that's the perception that has been deeply there, that abortion and reproductive care is something that is I guess, unnecessary. But the fact is, this provides a necessary care service for women specifically, not just in terms of bodily autonomy. It is an overall, I guess, practice that brings a system that fights back against a system that has been forever used to oppress women and women of color specifically. It is a larger thing that needs to be dismantled, and you all do this work to help dismantle a lot of misconceptions and to bring forward a perspective of rights that we need to be aware of, that we have over ourselves, and the rights to be free, to be and exist as we are. So I'm so grateful to you and your entire team. And I'm grateful to everyone who's listened in and watched us on YouTube. Y'all take care of yourself, and may peace be on you all.